Okay, today I am going to get a chance to talk to somebody who I've been working with a bit lately. His name is Gianfranco Ceccolini, and he is the mastermind behind the Mod Devices pedal set. This is something that came out of my radar when I was at the NAMM show last year. The guy that was working the run with me, Tom Hall, was like, "Oh, you have to check out what Gianfranco's doing." So we went down into Hall E, and I was introduced to this really cool little pedal and this amazing infrastructure to run on the pedal. It's basically a browser-based pedal arranger that's outrageous. But then as we started talking, it became even more interesting because it's a pedal that you can actually write your own code for. Since I'm a kind of a code head, I really enjoyed the sound of that. And so I've been working with him ever since. And recently we did a thing where Max MSP's Gen code now can run on the Mod Devices pedal. It's pretty fantastic. And I've been building my own little top secret rig here for my own use. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, enough of my talking. Let's talk to Gianfranco. Hey, Gianfranco, how are you doing?
Hello, Darwin. It's a big pleasure to be here. And thanks a lot for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks a lot for letting me rattle on a bit. But from the second I saw what you were doing, I was very excited by it. And I remain excited by it because it delivers what you promise, which is kind of cool.
Well, the Duo, it's a lot of fun. We are very impressed with the feedback that we're getting from the users. It's really seems to be paying off all the effort that we put in order to build the infrastructure itself. As I said, it's a complete ecosystem.
Right.
It's coming out very nicely now that the community is growing, and the Duo relies a lot on community effect. So it's now starting to get lots of traction. It's really good.
Right. Now, for people who maybe aren't familiar with it, the version of the pedal that you have right now is called the Duo. Why is it called the Duo? Just because it has like two screens, or?
Yeah, sort of. I started this quite some time ago, Darwin. Actually, I started working on this in 2010. There's quite a journey since then. I'm from Brazil, and we started this in Brazil. And we had a product that we released only in the Brazilian market in 2013, which was called the Mod Quadra. It had 4 controllers, and we thought it was a nice name. And then when we were thinking about going for smaller products, and this was the biggest feedback we got with the Quadra, that it was too big.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were thinking, okay, how to name the guys? And I don't like code names. I like proper names, like persons.
Sure.
And Duo seemed to be a nice one because it has, it's two inputs, 2 outputs, but at the same time 2 controllers. You can use it with 2 different instruments, so you can use it as a duo, like a musical duo. Lots of wordplay with that.
Right.
So I don't have one particular reason for the name, but the Duo word sticks to the device in lots of different ways.
Sure, it really does. I'm a little bit curious about about how you got this thing started. So the Duo actually is the result of a Kickstarter, right?
Yes. We were in Brazil. Well, let me rewind this a bit to the start.
Okay.
I played the guitar since I am an early teenager. I think since 1989 I got my first guitar. And on the same year I got my first computer also, a PC AT286, something like that.
Okay.
Didn't run even Windows. And I've been tinkering with the computers and with the guitar since then. And I've always been into computers, as the same way I've been into guitars. But I never managed to have a proper connection between the guitar and the computer. I actually never linked them properly, on a sense that for me, computers were things to do work or programming and etc. And the guitar is that other environment that I plug my pedals and just rock on, like no technology involved, just music.
Yep.
And as soon as I started I bought my first digital multi-effects. I used to use pedals before. And at one point I went to the multi-effects because the pedals, they have all that problem of weight, and it scales very fast as you add more pedals, and the power supply for each of them. I find the pedals, although I like them a lot, I find them a bit cumbersome when you're going actually on the road with the band and trying to do gigs in places. And then I went there and bought my first digital multi-effects. It was a Korg A5. First thing I realized is that those are closed packages, on the sense that for the A5, for example, it had great modulation, delays, reverbs, but the distortions, they were awful, really awful. And I said, okay, so I have this package here, this box that kind of should deliver all the sounds that I need, but some of them are totally unusable, so I still keep needing to have the pedals. And that was very annoying. And I moved it to another multi-effect, Korg, again, the G3, which was supposed to have a very good distortion, and it had, but it was too simple, and it was very limited on the way that you program it. So then I had another problem, which is, okay, this is a kind of a super pedal, but still not. And I never got to the point, Darwin. Never got to the point that I say, okay, now I'm satisfied. And the conclusion that I got is that these multi-effects, they were digital only on the backbone, but on the way to market it and on the business model, let's say, it's still analog, on the sense that you still have to buy a box and you're stuck with what you got. If you want more things, you have to buy new ones. And being a computer savvy person, I said, okay, why can't I reprogram this? Like, why is it not possible? And the idea of doing the mod thing came from this question. Like, why can't I have a processor for my music that I can reprogram it? Mm-hmm. When I was doing this, the PCs, when the idea came out first was in, I think, 2002, 2003, something like that. I was discussing with some friends because there was a bit of processing being done on the computer, but no real-time processing. I had a Pentium 2 megahertz at that time. It was not capable of doing proper real-time audio at all. VST had come out for a short time, and it was only for post-production. Mm-hmm. We thought about this, it would be awesome if we could do this on a PC, but at the same time, the PC doesn't have the ergonomy that's necessary for a musician. It's not, keyboard and mouse. They don't mix with the stage, all these things. And then I ended up buying a development kit from Analog Devices. This was in 2008. This was the first time we decided, okay, let's see if we can build this stuff. I bought this kit. It was a Shark DSP from Analog Devices. We tried lots of stuff. Only in 2010 is when we actually got some money from the Brazilian government, like a grant, to put in the project. And this really kicked off the idea. And at this year, we were still with the DSP, but we changed it from the Shark to the Blackfin, which was another family of DSPs. Okay. And by the mid of 2010, we had kind of a prototype, our very first prototype, and we saw that we had to port everything. All the code, everything needed to be ported. And I said, okay, this the idea, it's great, but this won't work. On the sense that I don't have the manpower to do all of this.
To rewrite everything ever made.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. No. And in the end, I said, let's imagine that I would have that manpower. Then I had a second problem, which is, okay, now I'm competing toe-to-toe with Roland and with Line 6 because they are providing algorithms, and I will need to be an algorithm provider as well. So that became, okay, this is a blocker. In parallel with this, but I've been, since the start of Linux in Brazil, I've been kind of a Linux enthusiast, not a heavy user. And at one point with my personal computers, I went back to desktops. I started using notebooks for a long time, switched to Mac, stopped using Windows. And when I moved from São Paulo to Rio, I said, okay, let me buy a desktop for me again. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go for a Linux box. Ubuntu had been released like 1 or 2 years before that, and it was already kind of the big thing in Linux at the time, 2007, I believe. Okay. I was astonished. I was really astonished. There was this kind of a cousin from Ubuntu, was called Ubuntu Studio.
Yes.
And you could install it on your machine, was really easy, and you had complete OS for multimedia production. I mean, there was the Jack audio server to route the audio internally, and there was the plugins from LADSPA, and a plug-in rack and Guitar Rigs was already there, and I was so impressed. I never connected this to the pedal, impressively enough, and because we were using the DSP. And at one point when we got this prototype, I sat down with the guys that were working with me and I say, guys, this is not possible. This won't work. But there is something happening now with the PCs. Since the smartphones started growing a lot, the PCs manufacturers, especially Intel, they realized that they have to go embedded because it was starting to get clear that the PC as it is, it's going down. Taking the smartphones and the tablets were taking this market.
Right.
And so with this, I think that Intel started putting efforts on smaller form factors for the motherboards. And we had the mini ITX boards that were released in 2010, and they were really nice because they were 17 by 17 centimeters, 12 volt power supply. You could plug it directly to a 12 volt source. So I said, okay, we can put one of these inside a box in the floor. That's possible, you know. And Linux at the same time will give us all the necessary code that we need so that we don't need to port everything. It's already running out of the box. It's a PC.
Right.
And we can customize it because it's Linux. We can customize it to the limit on the sense that we take out everything from the OS and leave it just what's necessary to have the unit in the floor. We can control it by network and all these things. So Linux on this sense was extremely important. This decision to move to the PC, or let's say the generic CPU, this changed everything, Darwin, because then we started thinking on a product that it's not more about DSP coding, but actually how do we rethink the computer to be on the floor instead of being on our desk? Right. You know, like let's rethink the PC to become an MC, a musical computer, and not a PC computer. So this was a big pivot for us, Darwin, and it changed everything. Because in the beginning, my idea was from a guitar player's point of view. So I want to do a box that has effects that I can change the effects. And when we move it to Linux and we have the entire OS available to us, then I say, okay, now this is not for guitar players anymore. This is for everyone because we have all kinds of plugins. We have a MIDI infrastructure already built in. This changed the thing so much, Darwin, that it took me, I believe, 3 years to totally understand what the shift meant in terms of the product. Because we still kept going on with the effects and adding MIDI, adding some stuff. But then in 2013 that we realized we released the Mod Quadra in Brazil. And it was a big flop. It was... well, we are all engineers. We did no marketing effort. We just started selling it, and they say, "Oh, why don't people buy it?" You know, like it's wonderful. Today I look back and I even laugh because I say, "Okay, this is a joke. Right? It's not how you do it, but it's okay." And then, but we got so much feedback with the Quadra from the people that tried it. We lent it to so many musicians in Brazil, and the decision that we had was, okay, so we need a different unit. We need a unit that's smaller. With the Quadra, we had some lots of off-the-shelf components. You can do a product with that, but it doesn't look like a mass-produced product. It looks like a big prototype still. Right. And we said, okay, we have to do a board by ourselves. And to do all of this, we needed scale. And Kickstarter seemed to fit like a glove for that. Also with that, we had a geographical problem, which is Brazil. The economy in Brazil, it's far from being good for technologies. We are an agricultural country, so most of the economy in Brazil is based on extraction of natural resources or agriculture. And there's nothing in Brazil that's even similar to the US or to Europe in terms of producing technology and developing. And then we said, okay, guys, we have to move out of Brazil to make this happen. And then, so
you're saying there just isn't the infrastructure in Brazil to put together a company like this?
Yes, because the ecosystem for companies, it's not structured for that, Darwin. We start with the imports. I see. It's the first thing at all. So everything that we buy, it's imported. And for example, to make the Quadra, the Quadra, we had to import the motherboard, we had to import the displays, lots of components. So in the end, our bill of materials for the Quadra was like $600. How do you sell a product like that? It's impossible. And the same bill of materials if I bought in the US, for example, would be like 200 and something. So this doesn't work, and Brazil doesn't have a big market that's enough to grow a business. So we need to sell abroad as well, but it's impossible to compete. And so for a number of reasons, we said, okay, we're going out of Brazil, and let's use the Kickstarter for that. Let's guarantee that we have some sort of sales so that we can move the business with some security to say, okay, we go to a place where this can actually happen, and we already have pre-sales for that. This was the basic idea. Very naive, I would say, but we need to be a bit naive in order to have the courage to do things, huh? And we did a Kickstarter. It was awesome. It was funded. This was in October 2014. We got 200 pre-sales. While our first decision was to move to the US, during the campaign, we got so many orders from Europe, and the Linux community is heavily based in Europe.
Yes.
My ancestors are from Italy. My other team members are also Italian, from an Italian family. So for us, getting the visas and I have an Italian passport, all these small things help it a lot to change the plans and not go to the US and come to Europe. So we ended up in Berlin. That's what happened. Berlin, I always liked the German engineering infrastructure for what we are doing. Consider the quality of the device to be of major importance, really major importance. I think that musicians are very fussy with the equipment, and I am very fussy with my equipment. And so I wanted to be in a place where I could do the engineering in a local way. We tried to do some sourcings in China, but we don't have the experience to that. You need to be a very big company to go to China in a safe way, let's say.
Right.
And here in Germany is the place where we found the engineering, the manufacturing, the logistics. Everything seems to fit right in place. There is all this startup ecosystem coming out in Berlin. Then we have the scene in Berlin with the music companies like Ableton and Native and Bitwig. So for a number of reasons, Berlin seems to us to be like the city to come. And this is how we ended up here. We finished the Kickstarter campaign here in Berlin, and this is where we are building the company now.
Interesting. Well, it's what a story, but also one that it seems like not only did you make good decisions, but also timing worked out for you well. I mean, I can imagine the idea, especially when the Quadra didn't really hit for you, it could have been very discouraging, and it would have been very hard to say, we're going to do something that, where we're betting the company on something like the Duo, and we're going to move to another country and all this other stuff. It would have been hard to do that without having something like Kickstarter say, here's your first 200 users, right?
Oh, no, for sure. I think that Kickstarter, Darwin, it provides some sort of validation, whatever it is.
Right.
But I wouldn't be able to convince myself to do that without this validation.
Right.
Because you need something to rely on. You know, something that otherwise you feel like, and especially after the Quadra.
Yeah.
That we said, okay, that the sales didn't do so. Okay, are we doing a new product? And what happens if the sales don't happen again?
Are we just being stupid? Right.
Exactly.
You have to worry about that, right? So, you said that in doing the Kickstarter, you were a little naive. What about it now looks naive to you?
The thing is that I think that the biggest thing on being naive is that lots of people consider Kickstarter to be something that will fund you to make the product. And this is very naive. This is very stupid, actually. The Kickstarter will only fund you in terms of pre-sales. So if there is development to be finished, that development should not at all count on the Kickstarter funds.
Right. You should have it already designed and developed, you're saying.
Or option B, which is you get funding from a company, so like from investors.
Right.
And then you run the Kickstarter only to do the pre-sales, but you need to be extra funded.
Mm-hmm.
And there's because if you go into this idea that the Kickstarter backers will fund the development, then you would have to charge for the Kickstarter units more money than you would when they go to the actual market. And that doesn't make sense at all, because why would a person in Kickstarter spend even more money on something that might not actually happen? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
They are paying for the others to have the profit. It doesn't make sense at all. In our case, there is one thing that helped a lot, Darwin, and this was a decision that we did when we did the Quadra, which is, before I had the Quadra, in the Christmas of 2011, I finished my first proper prototype, like the PC-based one with the mini ITX inside.
Right.
And with this guy, we did more than one prototype, actually. And we went with these units around to other companies because we were looking for someone to do the graphical interface.
Okay.
At that moment, it was just like similar to Macs, rectangles that you connect.
Right.
But I wanted the pedal-like thing. I wanted to be more friendly. The software that we were using, it was a Windows software. We had to do a Windows one. And I said, okay, so now we have to do another one. The client software to configure the device. Then I was okay. Now I need a Mac one, and I need a Windows one, and a Linux one, and then comes the smartphones and etc. And I was getting crazy with this. For me, this is not the way to go.
Right.
Because of Linux and all this thing that Linux has built in its core, which is the network stack, I said, okay, if we are using Linux, let's go for a network approach, like a network abstraction. Mm-hmm. And we use web technologies so that it becomes platform agnostic. Mm. And this was a very smart move and one of our most certain decisions, Darwin. Because then when we came to do the Kickstarter, we had the Quadra ready. And when I mean the Quadra ready, I mean that we already had the GUI that was HTML based, and everything was running inside on the back end was platform agnostic, mostly Python based. Right. So the development that we had to do from the Quadra to the Duo in terms of software was very small. All the development that we had to do here in Germany was mostly hardware, like layout the boards and making the enclosure. But the system itself was ready before the Kickstarter actually happened.
That makes things a lot clearer for me, because it was hard for me to understand. I mean, the graphic user interface, for listeners who aren't familiar with the Mod Devices system, you really need to go to their site, which is, in fact, moddevices.com. You need to go to their site and take a look at what the user interface looks like. It is very refined. It is very intuitive for anybody who is used to working with effects pedals and stuff like that. But it also is clearly the result of a long amount of effort. And so knowing kind of what it takes to put together a chunk of hardware and also knowing what it takes to do software design, it was hard for me to imagine that, like in 2013, you decided to just, let's start this. And, in a couple of years, you had all of this stuff done. So it makes sense that you're actually leveraging all the work you did on the Quadra from a software standpoint.
There's an interesting thing in that, which is, again, being naive. We had the software, and the first take was that, okay, software, we have to do nothing.
Right.
But then then you start, okay, so no, but actually we can change this element here on the back end. And since we changed this, let's restructure, you start refactoring stuff because we wanted the Duo to be very stable. And so we ended up doing a big chunk of the software again, like refactoring it. And this ended up being a very good thing. Like the Duo came out even more stable than we ever imagined, and it works like a charm. But it would be possible not to do any of the refactorings and still have a product that go to the market. But then we would have maintenance problems now that would be a nightmare. So all this refactoring helped a lot, but they were not blockers. We did them because we said, okay, guys, we are here. We had a great coder.
Improvement, right?
Yeah, because we are tired of having all this clunky code here. So let's put a bit of effort. And this is an interesting thing, again, that I don't know if it's a strike of luck. I can't say, Darwin, but just the following. When we started doing all of this, if we look at these development boards that we see on the market today, like the Beagle board or the Kubi board and all these, the Raspberry Pi, which is one of the most famous. If you look at these guys, when we started the mod as a PC platform, the only board that was available was the Beagle board. The Beagle board was not even the Beagle bone.
Right.
And when the Beagle board was released, for me it was like a message to say, okay, guys, there's something happening in technology, and we are very soon going to have full stack Linux running on these small boards. It's just a matter of time. When we did the Duo, this was 2 years later, we were working on the Kubi board because it uses the CPU that we have, the A20. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that what we had for the Kickstarter, when you buy a Kubi board, you have an image of the OS, which is kind of, let's say, it's a closed image. There's lots of proprietary code, things not properly sorted out. So you can build a root file system out of that. You can clean it to the point that you need, but it's still not something that you generated yourself. What I mean is that you can do a product with this, but it's still in a fragile, like a vulnerable position. And the big changes that we did while already here in Germany was to try to redo this part of the OS, the very back end of the system. And we developed our own build system for the entire OS. On a sense that today we have an infrastructure to generate an operating system. We can customize it. It's really scalable to do that. And this was something, again, it was not necessary. But now that we have it, it's so comfortable. It's so comfortable because we have we gained some sort of technology window with that. Because now that the trend is like a mainstream trend of devices being independent of the computer again.
Right.
We already have in the market operating system that is lean, it's optimized to audio, it's highly configurable, and companies will take between 1 and 2 years to develop that by their own. So we are being approached by companies to license our OS, which is very interesting from a business point of view. Huh?
Yeah, I imagine. Well, but, some of what you just said kind of flies in the face of a lot of people's experience. I think I, like so many people, have been entranced by the allure of Linux, but the reality of Linux sometimes disappoints, right?
For sure. I get very disappointed sometimes.
Well, especially from a media operating system standpoint, it can be very discouraging to not have clarity about what kind of audio interfaces work with it. How do I configure jack so that it makes sense to, someone with a finitely sized brain, right? Some of these things, the complexity or the lack of clarity can really get in the way of it being useful. So I'm actually curious about, you said that you kind of really got excited about this in the first place based on your experiences using Ubuntu Studio and the allure of a Linux-based music computer. And now what you've done is you've kind of created something that's a very finely tuned version of that. How much Linux experience did it take, and how much pre-knowledge did you have to even be able to understand how to do that? I'm curious about like how. Okay. Because when I approach Linux and want to do something that's media oriented, it's overwhelming.
Well, I think that if we think with the desktop mindset, the tools are all there, but the learning curve to use Linux is too big. I consider it to be a blocker. Okay. For me, it was very exciting because I am a computer geek, let's say. And I like the idea of spending time configuring the computer. Actually, let me rephrase that. I like it, the idea. I don't like it anymore. But I used it to like in my 20s, especially. I love the idea. Oh, I can recompile the kernel.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm a hacker. Actually, today, if we look at the team, I am not even involved with that anymore, Darwin. We have team members that are like real Linux experts. When we did the first prototypes that were Linux based, I was using a Slackware. I don't know if you are acquainted
Yep.
with Slackware.
Yes.
So
Yep.
yeah, and I was a big fan of Slackware. I like it, the methodology. And what I did was to dump the entire OS into a compact flash card, compile my own kernel with the RT, with the real-time patch,
Right.
and that's it. I did no customizations at all.
I see.
And the system just worked because the kernel is real-time,
Right.
and then all the rest was our own software.
Mhm.
Today, when I look at the OS that runs inside the Duo, it's a totally different beast. All the packages that are there have a reason to be there, and they are all optimized for our platform. This is the work that I said that we've been doing on
Right.
refactoring and making all these OS. This is a proper one, but I am not personally capable of doing that. I have people here in my team to do that.
Sure.
They are very good in doing that, but I am not. As I said, my quick and dirty solution in the prototypes was to put Slackware, and just to be on the safe side, let's put all the packages, and that's
Right.
it.
Just in
You know, like
case. Right.
just in case, oh, but there is this printer package. No, just put it, just in case. And but that doesn't work on a production environment.
Right. So now, you have built quite a team behind this setup. When I go to your site and I look at your people's page, you've got 8 people now currently working on this. Now you have a lot to do, and on one hand, 8 people may not seem like a lot, but on the other hand, for someone just kind of starting to get some momentum, it's got to feel like a lot of people to help support. Now, I assume that what you have is you have some very specific software and hardware development people on board, right?
Yep.
Um, so what do you do besides do interviews with podcast guys?
Okay. I do everything that the team is not assigned to do.
Got it.
So everything that is on the black sack, we don't have a person for this task, so that's me. And as a CEO, I must ensure that we have the money to keep on
Right.
moving. That's my 2 main duties are these ones. I do a lot of technical development, Darwin. On the mechanical side, we don't have a mechanical engineer a part of me. So I design the enclosures. Everything that's mechanical, it's with me also.
Okay.
But I want to move out of that as well. Being on the management position and on the execution position at the same time, it's very bad.
Well, if nothing else, too, it's really hard to get frustrated with yourself when you don't have time to do everything, right?
Uh-huh.
As a result of this kind of stuff, and your move to Berlin, did you bring your team from Brazil to Berlin, or did you move to Berlin and pull a team together once you got there?
It's a mixture.
Oh, okay.
We brought some people, and we added people while we were here.
Got it.
So it was a mix.
How long have you been in Berlin?
We moved in Berlin January 2015.
Okay.
We came with some people, but some people even departed. Actually, this move to Berlin was interesting, Darwin. I don't know. Well, cycling, it's a much older company. I think that the company, especially with the product like the Duo or let's say the Mod, it's very easy to get kind of this fantasy, the startup thing, and this product is all, and so it's very easy to get kind of deluded by that. So coming with the team here was nice, from a company point of view, because you trim out the people that are not, like they are kind of, let's do it, but you need a bit more of than this shallow excitement.
You need real commitment in order to come through.
Yeah, right? It's commitment plus love, and if you don't have those ones, in the proper dose, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think that the move to Berlin, although very painful, it was very useful on this sense to to have the team, only the members that actually matter.
Well, it seems like also Berlin, unlike even the United States, like everyone talks about Silicon Valley as being a place where there's funding available and stuff. That's true if you're trying to do the next pet food web company or something, right? It seems like Berlin is actually the heart of music funding or funding for music technology and stuff like that. Did did you in any way find it easier to get sort of like the infrastructure support there, or was it harder because there was so much competition from other companies?
That's a tricky question, Darwin, because when you come to Berlin, I think that you have two big groups, let's say. One of them is the German traditional, the people that were already here, the Ableton/Native Instruments group,
Right.
which is the company that they rose by the early 2000s. And so now they are established companies and they were funded by the Bank of Berlin. Very local thing,
Right.
okay, for a local. And then there's a second thing, which is this startup, like this next Silicon Valley thing that it's starting to happening here in Berlin, which is much more to the pet food, as you were saying, that the music thing.
Okay.
Because then the mindset, it's the same. I want to invest in a company to make 100-fold in 5 years.
All right. Yeah, and then get out. Right.
Exactly. But for a music company, which is already kind of niche, if you think like
Right.
worldwide, and a hardware company, come on, 5 years. I'm working more than 5 years already on that.
Right.
It's it doesn't convince these kind of investors.
Right.
So for us, it makes much more sense to go for public funding and etc.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, then instead of Berlin, we have other options. Belgium, there are lots of these public bodies in Europe in general to raise funds for that. And so I don't think it's a strictly German thing or Berlin thing. And actually, because of this new mainstream startup scene coming on, I think that it's even making it worse to raise money for the actual, the Berlin core stuff.
Right.
Because it's the focus is shifting to more of the Silicon Valley mindset.
Model. Yeah. Well, and then also you're probably in the worst position from getting funding, which is that, you have an actual product, so you can't try selling a dream because you can point to the thing, and so it's got to be realistic. You have to talk in terms of realism. Like, here's a real thing we have to sell, but now the people that you're asking to invest, they can't pretend what they're investing in. They have to look at it and buy into it, right? And it seems like investors, as soon as they have something real, it's
not cool anymore.
It's not cool anymore, right? It's hilarious, but it's true, right?
Although this makes the things, you are totally right, Darwin. For us, it's much more difficult to raise money because of this. We are not selling a dream anymore.
Right.
Well, it's still a dream on the sense that where we can get. But the first step, it's already here. But this, I think that has an upside, which is the people that agree to invest in us, it's very clear and it's very transparent what is the reality.
Right.
And then you don't have those things that really take my sleep off, which is to get some kind of investor that will try to liquidate you in 2 years because you didn't reach some kind of crazy
Mythical
metric.
goal. Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, there's no myths here. It's this is only reality. These are the sales that we are doing, and if we put this amount of money, we can get to this number, and that's it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You can put something on their desk, and if they buy into it, that kind of tells you what kind of investor they are.
Exactly.
Interesting. Very smart. So you kind of mentioned where this can go, and I think that anybody who looks at your software hardware combination immediately can imagine the directions that you can take this, right? But why don't we let you make them more concrete? What do you see as the future for the mod devices ecosystem?
That's a question, Darwin, that I actually only managed to answer to myself quite recently, which is, what are we in the end? And the conclusion that we got is that we are doing a new digital platform for musicians in a very broad sense. Let's think on the computer again. So there is this digital revolution going on. Smartphones, tablets, the PC itself, the internet, all these things. And in order to participate on this revolution that's going on, we need some sort of device. So the PC, the Mac, the iPhone. These are all the devices that are the enablers for us to move into this revolution that's going on, the IoT, let's say. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that if we look at the population in the world and we think about the musicians, we are a very limited group. I would say something about between 1% and 2% of the population, people actually creating music. So when you have the companies that do those digital devices, they're not thinking on the musicians. They're thinking on anyone but the musicians. And then the musicians have to adapt to that. So this is how you come out with these amplitubes and guitar rigs and stuff that, okay, I'm running in my computer, but I'm using my guitar, so I need an audio interface, and now I need an external controller, and you have to assemble this Frankenstein.
Right.
Actually, and this is happening because the companies doing the computers themselves, they're not thinking on the musicians. Mm-hmm. They are thinking on people, on desks, typing stuff, and looking things on a screen. That's it. And when we think on the musician and how the musician performs, this changes everything in terms of what are the requirements, ergonomy-wise, for example, for this device. And so what I think that we do on the very broad sense, we do a new platform, which is not a smartphone, it's not a tablet, it's not a PC, like a desktop computer. We do the mod device. And the mod device, it's kind of a computer, but it's meant for the performing musicians. Going from this point, what we see ourselves doing in the future, it's a complete array of different devices for not different musicians, but different use cases. So we have the Duo, for example. The Duo, I like it a lot, that it does all the work that a single musician needs. So it doesn't matter if he plays the guitar, if he plays the keyboard, if he sings, the Duo can make it all. Mm-hmm. But the Duo already introduces one part of the concept that I find to be very rich, which is you can have two musicians using the same device because we have the two inputs and you can assemble independent chains for each of them. So you could have a singer and a guitar player, for example. If you add the MIDI part via USB, you can even have 3 musicians or 4, let's say. And this brings, for me, is the seed of an idea which it's part of my dream, which is the processor for the band. Today, when we think on music and we think on a band playing, each musician has his own stack of equipment, his own gear. And what we do is we go together in a room and then each of us play with our own gear and the sound is mixed in the air physically. So let's think that we have everybody connected to the same mod and the mod has multiple inputs. And so we are mixing all this music that is being done. It's being mixed while still on the digital domain. And then we go to the amplification and the things that go out in the air on the sound, it's already the final mix. This brings so many interesting possibilities, Darwin, because then because everything is on the same digital domain, it means that we can have things like the kick drum setting the tempo of the delay of the guitar player, or the vocals modulating the bass. You know, you can go to new compositional possibilities that are not feasible now when we have individual equipment.
They're either not feasible or else they're just too much of a hassle to bother with, right?
Oh yeah, you would have to do a big art installation to do right. That. Not something that you can have out of the box and you can
not
carry
on
around.
Stage for sure, right?
This is, for me, when I think where we are heading, Darwin, it's something like that. It's this computing platform in which it can serve from the individual musician to the entire band. And I think that this is so exciting because so many compositional possibilities come out of that. So, and I think it's kind of the vision on the very long term.
Well, that's quite a vision, but also it's one that it really does make sense because, you know, certainly from electronic musicians' standpoint, interaction from device to device is getting to be a big thing anyway. But it sure would be interesting if your drummer and bass player and singer could also be part of that matrix of interaction. So that's a really neat vision.
Yes, and the important thing here, Darwin, is that this is my Brazilian soul telling, okay? For we Brazilians, having a button to set the tempo, it's a big sin. We are the rhythm country.
Right.
So for us to set a tempo 120 BPM, this doesn't make sense at all. And what I like about this idea of having everything mixed in the digital domain is that you can have the things still organic, very organic on the performance sense, but it's still very digital and very modern on the actual sound.
Right.
But so everything is interconnected. But I am setting the tempo organically, for example.
Right.
Like everything is connected, everything is in sync. But the master tempo, it's something that's real and alive, and it's not a crystal that it's giving me an exact tempo.
Right.
And this, for me, it's a big thing, Darwin. It's a real big thing. It's the difference between humans and machines.
Right. Well, and it's a thing. Inevitably, whenever in the past, whenever electronic music has become, somewhat above ground, what ends up kind of defeating it is like a very human music, right?
Uh-huh.
And it seems like there has to be a way to make a more human variation of electronic music, and it seems like you have got the kernel of something there.
It's what we are looking at, huh?
Right. Our time is pretty much up. I want to thank you for spending this time. But before I let you go, I have one last question, which is just one of curiosity for me. You have made a device that kind of can be anything. I was goofing around with it one day, and I literally made a device. I hooked up a MIDI controller to it, so I had access to a bunch of sliders and buttons. And I made a device that was like 8 simultaneous loopers, along with a wave shaper and stuff like this. It was a ridiculous arrangement, but it was fun for playing for a day, right?
Okay.
I'm curious, as a guitar player yourself, and knowing the system intimately, and knowing that you have literally every kind of processor available, when you work with the Mod Devices pedal, what does your arrangement look like? What do you use?
Okay. I have to divide the answer in 2 parts.
Okay.
Part 1, Gianfranco, the guitar player that with his traditional guitars, okay?
Right.
And for me, the mod is a pedal. I like setting very simple pedal boards, very simple ones, like chorus and delay. Very simple ones, and they are all there, and I just put it out of the box, plug the guitar, and play. It's the most dumb and simple use case that we have. That's my use case. It's like it's how I like it. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
Then comes another guitarist, Gianfranco guitar player, which is the MIDI guitars. I bought a Godin with the triple play recently.
Yes.
So I can input the duo with the MIDI that's hexaphonic, so polyphonic MIDI plus the real guitar. And this opened so many doors for me on the musical sense. Then I do very crazy stuff. I actually don't even use the pickups anymore. I use only the synth. But I played it with the guitar because I cannot play the keys. I'm not a keyboard player.
Right.
But I love the sound of the synths. So for me, the idea of playing that synth sounds like Depeche Mode, but using my guitar in the fretboard, I love it. I really love it. It's so much fun. It's what I've been using the most, I think, on this mod duo approach. And I do these crazy pedal boards like that. But when we go only for the very simple guitar, I'm a very basic guy.
Interesting. Well, I think that anyone who just heard what you said, though, also hears both your commitment and your love for the product. And so that makes you a very good CEO for this company. Gianfranco, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. This was a fascinating chat and great fun. It was good catching up with you, but also great hearing the story of how this company came about and what direction you imagine it going. It's really fascinating.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, Darwin. It was a pleasure.
All right, thank you. And with that, I'll let you go. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Gianfranco for hanging out, talking about his stuff, talking about the company and move from Brazil. That is really fascinating. If you're not that familiar with the Mod Devices tooling, you're going to want to check out their whole ecosystem over at moddevices.com. Otherwise, I want to thank you for stopping by and listening again. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, drop me a line, ddg@cycling74. Otherwise, thanks a bundle, and I will catch you next time around. Bye.